Welcome to Royal Empire, your #1 source for exclusive palace investigations and breaking royal news. I'm your host, and today we are bringing you a story that goes straight to the heart of the British monarchy. Buckingham Palace has launched a quiet internal investigation, and what they're examining has sent shockwaves through royal circles. Make sure you subscribe right now, because this is history unfolding in real time. Hit that subscribe button and stay with Royal Empire. Something deeply unsettling has begun behind palace gates. This isn't tabloid chatter, it isn't speculation, and it isn't rumor. It is something far more serious. According to insiders, Buckingham Palace has initiated what they are calling an internal verification review, and the focus of this review is Archie and Lilibet. For the monarchy, this step is almost unthinkable. If there is one thing the Crown fears more than public criticism or controversy, it is uncertainty, especially uncertainty surrounding family lineage. Titles can be adjusted. Public roles can be changed. But when there is even a shadow of doubt surrounding placement in the bloodline, the foundation of the monarchy begins to shake. The line of succession must be absolute, precise, and beyond challenge. If Buckingham Palace has reached the point of launching a review this serious, then something has gone wrong. Insiders describe the atmosphere inside the palace as frozen, the kind of tension that appears only when the Crown senses a risk not from outside forces, but from within its own structure. What began as quiet inconsistencies has now evolved into a full internal examination, conducted in silence, shielded by centuries-old protocol, and treated with the gravity of a constitutional matter. So what exactly forced the palace to act? Before we go deeper, make sure you're subscribed to Royal Empire. We bring you in-depth investigations, not surface-level headlines. Turn on notifications so you don't miss what comes next. This investigation was not triggered by a single dramatic moment. It was not sparked by public criticism or long-standing speculation. What caught the palace's attention was a pattern of small inconsistencies that initially appeared harmless, a detail missing from paperwork, a timeline that conflicted with earlier statements, a document quietly altered without explanation, an announcement made without verification. Procedures that did not align with royal standards that have been followed for generations. One irregularity can be overlooked. Two might be explained. But when advisors placed these details side by side, they no longer appeared random. They formed a picture that felt wrong. Every time one inconsistency was explained away, another emerged. According to palace sources, senior advisors eventually reached a point where they could no longer dismiss what they were seeing. Because the inconsistencies all centered around one critical issue, the births of Archie and Lilibet, the moments that determine whether a child is formally connected to the royal line. And when the question touches lineage, the palace does not speculate. It investigates. The review began quietly and methodically, with an understanding that the findings could carry long-term consequences. The first document examined was Archie's birth certificate. For most families, it's just paperwork. For the monarchy, it is a legal cornerstone. It establishes identity, legitimacy, and placement within the line of succession. Everything must be precise, consistent, and permanent. But Archie's certificate did not remain unchanged. Months after his birth, a quiet modification was made. Meghan's full legal name, Rachel Meghan Markle, was removed and replaced with the styling Her Royal Highness the Duchess of Sussex. No given name. No surname. Just a title. This is extremely unusual. Altering a birth certificate requires a formal request, documented approval, and a clear justification. Yet when investigators traced the change, the explanations conflicted. Meghan stated the palace requested it. Palace sources indicated the request came from her side. The accounts did not align, and no clear documentation explained why the change was necessary at all. For the monarchy, this raised an important question. If the foundational document was altered once without a clear trail, what else might not align? This discovery prompted investigators to look deeper, and what they found only intensified concerns. Attention then shifted to the circumstances surrounding Archie's birth itself. Royal births traditionally follow a well-established process. The palace announces labor. Approved medical professionals verify the birth. A formal bulletin is issued. A controlled public appearance follows. With Archie, this sequence did not occur. There was no announcement of labor. Hours passed without information. Then a statement was released indicating Meghan had just gone into labor, even though the child had already been born many hours earlier. This reversal raised immediate internal questions. Verification from medical professionals came after the public announcement, not before. When Meghan and Harry later presented Archie publicly, palace staff struggled to reconcile the statements with the timeline they were accustomed to documenting. The process did not resemble anything the royal system had recorded before. When investigators reviewed the supporting paperwork, the concerns deepened. Royal birth documentation is meticulous. Multiple professionals are listed. Witnesses sign records. Everything is logged immediately. In Archie's case, investigators did not uncover wrongdoing, but they did find gaps. Missing signatures. Unclear medical confirmations. Documentation that lacked the precision the monarchy relies upon. Individually, these were not explosive issues. Collectively, they raised serious flags. If Archie's records caused concern, the situation surrounding Lilibet intensified it. Her birth was announced not through Buckingham Palace, not through royal medical channels, and not via official British documentation. Instead, the announcement came through a private press release issued from California. There were no palace witnesses, no UK medical confirmations, no formal registry through the royal system. When investigators attempted to reconstruct the timeline, the gaps were even larger. Everything occurred outside the monarchy's jurisdiction. There was no documentation verified by the Crown's procedures. Photographic records raised further questions due to inconsistencies in progression and timing. The palace was not focused on public commentary, only on protocol, and protocol was absent. One detail stood out sharply. The physician reportedly connected to Lilibet's delivery closed their practice shortly afterward. No official royal documentation linked that medical professional to the birth. For investigators, this was another unresolved irregularity added to an already growing file. The concern escalated further when the palace reviewed christening records. Royal christenings are not casual family events. They are formal ceremonies tied to the Church of England and must be documented. When advisors checked official church registries, they found no record of Lilibet being christened under Church of England authority. No private entry. No confidential notation. No confirmation from senior church officials. This absence presented a constitutional issue. Without verification, the monarchy could not formally connect the child to established royal tradition. At this stage, the palace transitioned from quiet concern to a structured internal investigation. A dedicated team was assembled, including senior advisors, archivists, constitutional experts, and church liaisons. Their task was not accusation. It was reconstruction. Every announcement, document, photograph, statement, and timeline was examined and compared against royal standards. A full chronological framework was built, and as the review progressed, the gaps became more apparent. Missing documentation. Conflicting statements. Medical procedures outside protocol. A foreign birth without royal verification. An unrecorded christening. Inconsistent records. Each issue alone might have been manageable. Together, they formed a constitutional puzzle the palace could no longer ignore. According to insiders, Buckingham Palace now faces three potential paths. The first is quietly freezing the children's titles as they currently stand, with no future expansion or ceremonial recognition. The second is gradually reclassifying them as private individuals, without public announcement, allowing their royal association to fade over time. The third option is the most serious. Formal removal of titles and recognition, based solely on documentation and verification standards. This final option carries permanent consequences. Titles removed do not return. As the review continues, the palace remains silent. This is not about public reaction. It is about preserving institutional certainty. For Meghan, the implications reach into every aspect of her public identity. For Harry, sources suggest the situation has been deeply personal, but once the monarchy enters legal territory, emotion no longer guides the process. Behind closed doors, the Crown is preparing its next move. No announcements. No leaks. Just the quiet operation of an institution protecting its future. When the monarchy begins questioning lineage, it is not seeking attention. It is preparing for resolution. According to insiders, once the review team completed its initial reconstruction of events, the palace entered what is known internally as the consolidation phase. This is when uncertainty hardens into institutional concern. Files are no longer treated as background information. They become reference points for future action. And this is exactly where Archie and Lilibet's situation now sits. At this stage, the palace reportedly stopped seeking explanations and started assessing consequences. Because from the monarchy's perspective, intent does not matter as much as outcome. Whether irregularities were accidental, intentional, or circumstantial is secondary. What matters is whether the crown can confidently stand behind the documentation that defines its bloodline. And according to sources, confidence is precisely what is missing. One senior insider described the situation bluntly. The palace is not trying to prove something happened. It is trying to determine whether it can officially affirm that everything happened according to standards that have governed royal lineage for centuries. If it cannot, the institution must act to protect itself. This is where the Sussexes' distance from the royal system becomes critically important. When Harry and Meghan stepped back from official duties and relocated abroad, they also stepped outside the mechanisms that traditionally safeguard royal processes. At the time, this was framed as a personal decision. But internally, it created a structural gap, one that now leaves the palace without the verification framework it normally relies upon. Insiders say that during the consolidation phase, advisors revisited every instance where the Sussexes declined or bypassed royal involvement. Medical oversight, documentation routing, church coordination, public communication. Each choice, viewed individually, could be justified as a desire for privacy. But when examined together, they created a complete separation from royal accountability. And accountability is the foundation upon which royal legitimacy rests. This is also the moment when the palace reportedly stopped viewing Archie and Lilibet as isolated cases and started considering long-term precedent. Because whatever decision is made here will not just affect two children. It will define how future generations are handled when royal protocol is bypassed. The monarchy does not operate emotionally. It operates structurally. And structures must be consistent to survive. According to Royal Empire sources, legal advisors were brought deeper into the process at this point. Not to draft announcements, but to map implications. What happens if titles remain unchanged? What happens if they are limited? What happens if recognition is adjusted quietly over time? And what happens if the palace determines that formal confirmation cannot be issued under existing standards? These questions are not hypothetical. They are being actively evaluated. And this is where the Sussexes' public silence becomes significant. The palace is not requesting explanations through media channels. It is relying on what already exists in record. If documentation is incomplete, the palace will not attempt to fill gaps with statements or assurances. It will simply note the absence. Sources suggest this has created tension behind the scenes. Harry, in particular, is said to be struggling with the reality that royal systems do not bend for personal context. The institution he was born into does not negotiate its rules. It enforces them evenly, sometimes harshly, always finally. Meanwhile, Meghan's public-facing projects continue to reference royal identity and legacy, but insiders say this only increases internal pressure. Because the more royal association is emphasized externally, the more precise the palace must be internally. Ambiguity cannot coexist with branding. One advisor reportedly summed it up this way. The monarchy cannot allow uncertainty to sit at the center of its future while being broadcast to the world as certainty. One of those realities must change. This is why no public reassurance has come from Buckingham Palace. Silence is not avoidance. It is process. The Crown does not speak while files are open. It acts when conclusions are reached. And here is the most important development. Sources now say the internal review has moved from assessment to recommendation. This means outcomes are being drafted, not announced, but prepared. Each option includes timelines, legal pathways, and communication strategies. None of them involve public debate. If titles are frozen, it will happen quietly. If status is adjusted, it will be reflected subtly in official records. If recognition is formally removed, it will be done through established authority, not emotional explanation. The monarchy does not justify its decisions. It records them. What makes this moment unprecedented is not controversy. It is procedure. Never before has the palace had to evaluate royal-adjacent children whose births and early milestones occurred almost entirely outside its verification system. The Crown is navigating unfamiliar territory, but it is doing so using very familiar rules. As one source told Royal Empire, the palace is not reacting. It is correcting. And correction, in royal terms, is permanent. As this story continues to unfold, one thing is clear. The outcome will not be shaped by interviews, public sentiment, or online discussion. It will be shaped by records, confirmations, and institutional certainty. And once the monarchy reaches that certainty, it will move forward without hesitation. This investigation is ongoing, and Royal Empire will continue to bring you every development with clarity and depth you won't find anywhere else. Make sure you are subscribed, turn on notifications, and stay with us. Because when the palace finishes reviewing its own foundations, the results don't just affect one family. They redefine the future of the crown.